A security camera captured images of a 19-year-old girl as she was abducted from a convenience store. Forensic scientists needed to find some way to improve the images for possible leads. And a scanning electron microscope eventually identified the trail of the missing girl. Moose Lake, Minnesota, one of the many reasons why the state is known as the land of 10,000 lakes. This small town outside of Duluth was home to 19-year-old Katieoyer. Katie's interests included her family, several sports, and her pet dogs. After graduating from high school in 1998, Katie studied criminal justice at a nearby community college and also became engaged to her boyfriend, Mark. Katie worked as a clerk at this Moose Lake convenience store, a job her mother didn't want her to take.
My dad's deviants that would come in there, and she'd just say, "Oh, Mom, don't worry." And, that's how she was, very trusting person.
One night, around midnight, when Katie was working the night shift alone, a customer called police to say that the store was open, but there were no employees around.
Are you talking about the Conoco station there, Moose Lake?
Police went to investigate. There were no signs of violence, and no money was missing from the cash register or the safe, and Katie's car keys were still there. On the counter were notes with money from customers who had purchased items sometime after Katie left the store. Police wondered whether Katie might have left the store with a friend.
Was there anybody close to her in her family that may have come and taken her, either as a prank or for some other purpose? I never thought that she left on her own. Her car was still there, and she would have never done it. She would have never left on her own without calling her supervisor or something and locking the place up at least.
The store had 4 security cameras focused on various areas. At 11:38 p.m., the security cameras revealed a Caucasian man forcing Katie out of the front door into the parking lot. The pictures were grainy and showed few details of the abductor. There were no security cameras outside the store to photograph the getaway vehicle.
These things happen on TV, these don't happen for real. And it just was so hard to believe.
The store was located near a major highway, which meant the kidnapper could have left the area at high speed. A search of nearby streets and parks in Moose Lake was fruitless.
Participated in the search for hundreds of thousands of people that were involved and really took it to heart. And they were very concerned about trying to find Katie.
Neighbors near the store told police they saw a black pickup truck circling the area before Katie's abduction. And an employee at the sandwich shop next to the convenience store told police she had seen the same black pickup truck in the parking lot about 3 hours before Katie vanished. She said the driver was glaring inappropriately as female customers left the store. On a hunch, the employee wrote down what she could remember of the license plate. She said it was a Minnesota license plate and that the first 3 digits were 557. She also recalled that the last letter on the plate was a Y. Police hoped that if they found this black pickup truck, they would also find Katieoyer. Minnesota National Guard helicopters searched the area for 19-year-old Katieoyer. On the ground, dozens of community volunteers joined police in the search. But with each passing day, and no word from the kidnapper, hope started to fade that Katie would be found alive. Police searched their database for black pickup trucks registered in the state of Minnesota with a license plate beginning with 557 and ending with the letter Y. Surprisingly, there were hundreds of vehicles matching that description. Surveillance video captured images of the man who abducted Katie from the convenience store. The quality of the pictures was poor, and the images too distorted to clearly identify the kidnapper. To improve the pictures, police sent the tapes to NASA, which has many years of experience trying to improve pictures sent from space. Solar physicist Dr. David Hathaway created a process to enhance video images called VISAR.
It stabilizes the videos so that you can add images together. Doing so, you get rid of a lot of the noise that you see when you look at a still frame.
Dr. Hathaway says a video picture is really 2 different fields that create one picture. These 2 fields change so rapidly the human eye can't discern it. Dr. Hathaway combined the even and odd frames so that both could be viewed at the same time, creating twice the number of lines of resolution.
There are a number of individual frames, cameras that we can add together as well.
In one of those freeze frame images, Dr. Hathaway was able to isolate the kidnapper. When he removed some of the grain in the picture, he could see that the man had short, blonde, or gray hair, was approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall with an average build. And he wore a dark New York Yankees baseball jersey with the number 23 on the back. Unfortunately, even this new technique could not produce a clear image of the kidnapper's face. But using what they had, a police sketch artist released a rough drawing along with a physical description, including his clothing, to the media. Hundreds of tips poured into police. One of those tips led to Donald Dean Christensen, who had a past conviction on a sex offense. Christensen had been free at the time of Katie's abduction. Donald Dean Christensen had several tattoos, including a large one on his left forearm. But the security camera video revealed the kidnapper had no tattoo on his forearm. Christensen was cleared.
And your name, please?
3 weeks after Katie's abduction, dispatcher Paula Francisco answered a telephone call from a citizen who had a tip. It was lead number 1960.
This was the very first time that I felt we might be onto something here.
The caller worked at the Minnesota Veterans Home in Minneapolis and was suspicious of a janitor there who had just quit. His name was Donald Alvin Blom. The caller was suspicious because Blom changed his appearance around the time Katieoyer disappeared. Blom was 50 years old, married, and the father of 4 children. A background check showed that Blom had prior convictions for assault, rape, and kidnapping dating back to the 1970s. His last conviction was in 1983, when Blom had forced 2 young women into the woods at knife point and tied them to a tree. Fortunately, the girls escaped before they were assaulted.
This one made the hair stand up on the back of my neck.
But a check of motor vehicles revealed Blom did not own a black pickup truck as witnesses described. Police hoped a search of Blom's home would be far more revealing. When police descended upon the home of Donald Blom, they found no trace of Katieoyer. Blom said he was innocent and that he had an alibi for the night of Katie's disappearance. When investigators learned Blom owned vacation property near Moose Lake, they searched there too. Once again, there was no sign of Katie, but investigators noticed a large fire pit next to a trailer on the property. Technicians sifted the fire pit for trace evidence and found several small items that appeared to be bone.
I wasn't going to tell the Coyers, but I thought their daughter was dead. I wasn't going to take that hope away from them until I had some proof.
Police asked a forensic anthropologist, Dr. Susan Thurston Meister, to examine the fragments. She says human bone differs from animal bone. The cross-section of human bone has a circular pattern. Animal bone is linear.
So I began to sort them into an animal pile, human, and then again determined until the pieces were so small that
Dr. Meister examined the human bone fragments to determine the age and sex of the victim. This part of the pelvis, called the pubic symphysis, was key. The bone had an obtuse angle, greater than 90 degrees, indicative of a female. And the oval surface was heavily ridged, characteristic of a young adult. Skull fragments also helped determine the victim's age. The joints or sutures of the skull bones were open. Skull sutures typically close around age 35. Dr. Meister concluded the remains were those of a young woman.
the age of the individual represented in the fire pit was between the ages of 17 and 24 years of age.
While the findings were consistent with Katieoyer, it was far from a positive identification.
It sent me deeper and deeper into this black hole because I didn't want to think of the possibility of what it could be.
The bones were too badly damaged for DNA testing and collectively represented only 25% of a human skeleton.
Was the incomplete at the time she was burned, or were segments removed during the burning process? That we don't know.
But several tooth fragments also were recovered from Blom's fire pit. Investigators called in forensic odontologist Dr. Ann Norlander, who specializes in making identification based on dental x-rays. This tooth was the largest and most intact of those recovered.
It's and missing all the enamel, the protective.
Dr. Norlander identified the tooth as human. When she compared it to Katieoyer's dental records, she saw that the shape and size were consistent with Katie's lower left second molar, known as tooth number 18. And she noticed something else, what looked to be remnants of a filling in the tooth. Dr. Norlander asked forensic scientists at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension to conduct an analysis of the filling. Forensic scientist Mark Nielsen used a scanning electron microscope to magnify the filling so that it was thousands of times larger.
What it, in a sense, allows us to do is to actually determine what the elemental composition is of the particular substance that we have within the sample chamber.
The microscope bombards an isolated section of the sample with an electron beam, and different elements will react to the beam differently.
When this electron falls into the air shell, it gives off a very positive energy in the form of an X-ray, and this energy is associative of each element.
So the type of X-ray will reveal the elemental composition of the sample. The results showed that the filling material in the tooth was highly unusual. It contained zirconium and silicon in concentrations that they had never seen before in dental cement. When scientists contacted Katieoyer's dentist, Dr. Melanie Meyer, she told them something interesting. Her records indicated she had replaced a filling in Katie's tooth number 18 2 weeks before the abduction. Dr. Meyer said she used a brand new material not yet on the market to fill her tooth. The material was a sample called Rely X-Arc, which had been given to her at a dental conference.
That material was specifically designed to use with additive fillings and to bond it to your tooth. That procedure hasn't always been done, so it was something new.
Dr. Meyer told investigators that Rely X was manufactured by the 3M company, headquartered in Minnesota. When contacted by police, chemists at 3M said that Rely X contained concentrations of two elements, zirconium and silicon. The same materials in the same concentrations that were found in the tooth in Donald Blom's fire pit.
Was the positive identification of Katieoyer.
In a garage on one of Donald Blom's properties was the black pickup truck with the same license plate police were looking for. State records listed Blom's truck as white, a clerical error. Donald Blom was arrested and charged with Katieoyer's murder.
It is the most recent. I can't fathom anything worse than being kidnapped and murdered.
When confronted with the scanning electron microscope findings, Blom confessed to Katie's murder during a taped conversation with Special Agent Phil Wagner.
So curious in his voice. This is a dead man.
Blom admitted to kidnapping and killing Katieoyer. But 2 weeks later, Donald Blom recanted, claiming the confession was coerced. Prosecutors know that Blom was in the vicinity of the convenience store that day because his credit card receipts show he purchased liquor nearby around 5 p.m. The sandwich shop employees saw Blom leering at customers in the parking lot around 8 p.m., 3 hours before Katie was abducted. Blom may have seen Katie then and returned at 11:30, entering the store when she was alone. Prosecutors explained the scientific evidence to the jury, especially their smoking gun, the dental filling material in the tooth identified as Katie's, a material which was so limited in distribution it wasn't yet on the market. The jury understood the scanning electron analysis. Donald Blom was convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The verdict is little solace for the Poyers.
Christmas morning anymore for two kids.
As a result of this case, Minnesota lawmakers passed Katie's Law, which includes stiffer penalties for convicted sex offenders and mandates better ways for police to track past offenders. And the Conoco chain that employed Katie Poyer now requires that at least 2 workers are on duty each shift.